I stood at the altar, ready to marry the love of my life, when my sister ruined everything. She humiliated me in front of hundreds of guests, mocking me for being nothing more than a lowly barista. But what she didn't know, I was actually the CEO of a multi-million-dollar tech company, and in just 2 days, her entire world would come crashing down. My name is Lauren Carter, and for the past decade, my sister Vanessa has treated me like a failure. Ever since our parents passed away, she made it her mission to remind me that I would never be as successful as her. While she married a wealthy lawyer and flaunted her luxurious lifestyle, she thought I was barely scraping by, struggling to make ends meet. She had no idea that I was, in fact, the youngest CEO in my industry. No idea that my company was worth millions. And she certainly had no clue that her perfect husband was about to beg for a job from me. At my wedding, she humiliated me in front of everyone, but she didn't realize she was sealing her own fate. Because in just 48 hours, her entire life would be turned upside down. And I would finally get the justice I never asked for, but definitely deserved. The day of my wedding was supposed to be perfect. The venue was breathtaking, decorated with cascading white orchids and golden chandeliers that bathed the room in a warm, elegant glow. Every detail had been meticulously planned, from the delicate string quartet playing in the background to the gourmet 5-course meal awaiting the guests. But none of it mattered, because in that moment, as I stood at the altar, gazing into the loving eyes of my fiancé, my sister decided to steal the spotlight in the worst way possible. A sudden scrape of a chair echoed through the grand hall. I turned, only to see Vanessa standing up, her arms crossed over her designer dress, her expression a mix of arrogance and disgust. "This is ridiculous," she announced, her voice sharp and dripping with condescension. "My sister? A broke barista? Marrying a man like Ethan?" She let out a laugh, loud, cruel, and theatrical. "This is a joke, right?" A stunned silence fell over the crowd. Some guests gasped, others shifted awkwardly in their seats, whispering among themselves. My heart pounded, but I refused to let my composure slip. Ethan's grip on my hand tightened, his jaw clenched in silent fury. I could feel the rage simmering beneath his skin, but before he could speak, I gently squeezed his hand. "Vanessa," I said, my voice steady despite the burning heat of humiliation spreading through me. "Sit down." She scoffed, tossing her perfectly curled hair over her shoulder. "Oh, no. Everyone here deserves to know the truth. My sister didn't even finish college. She's been lying to all of you. She's nothing more than a waitress, pretending to be someone she's not." The murmurs grew louder, rippling through the room like an approaching storm. My stomach twisted, but not because of her words, because of the look on her husband's face. Andrew, usually so smug and self-assured, was now as pale as a ghost. His eyes darted toward me, a silent plea hidden behind them. He knew. And that was when it hit me. He knew exactly who I was. I almost smiled. Almost. Because in that moment, as Vanessa continued her public spectacle, she had no idea that her beloved husband was about to have the most important meeting of his life, with me. But before I reveal what happened next, the moment that left an entire ballroom in stunned silence, I want to connect with you, my incredible viewers. Where are you watching from? Drop your country's flag in the comments below. And if you've ever had to fight for your worth, hit that like button, because trust me, this story is just getting started. Before I could respond, before Ethan could unleash the fury burning behind his eyes, the grand doors of the ballroom swung open with a commanding force. The heavy oak creaked, and every head in the room turned toward the sudden intrusion. A man in a sharp navy blue suit strode inside, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. He walked with purpose, cutting through the tension like a blade. And then, in a voice clear and authoritative, he spoke. "Ms. Carter, I apologize for the interruption, but we have an urgent situation at headquarters. Your authorization is required immediately." For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, a ripple of whispers spread through the crowd. I could feel the weight of dozens of eyes shifting from the unknown man to me. But the only gaze I focused on was Vanessa's, her face frozen in sheer disbelief. She blinked once. Twice. Her perfectly manicured fingers trembled around the stem of her champagne glass. "Ms. Carter," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. I exhaled slowly, the tension that had been simmering within me now transforming into something else, satisfaction. I turned to the man, my expression poised, professional. The woman Vanessa thought was just a struggling barista vanished in an instant. "Understood," I said, reaching for the leather-bound folder he handed me. I flipped through the pages with practiced ease, then took the pen he offered and signed with a fluid motion. The name at the bottom of the document was bold, unmistakable. Lauren Carter, CEO of Carter Tech Industries. Vanessa staggered back, her mouth opening and closing like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. She looked to her husband for reassurance, but Andrew wouldn't even meet her gaze. He was staring at the ground, shoulders rigid, the color drained from his face. Of course, he already knew. I let the silence stretch, savoring the delicious unraveling of Vanessa's carefully constructed world. Then, just loud enough for only her to hear, I leaned in and whispered, "Oh, and Vanessa? Your husband has a meeting with me on Monday. Let's hope he's more professional than you." I didn't wait for a reaction. With my head held high, I handed the signed documents back, adjusted the train of my wedding dress, and walked out of the room with the confidence of a woman who had just won a game her opponent didn't even know she was playing. Vanessa thought she had humiliated me. But what she didn't know. She had just destroyed herself. Monday arrived faster than expected. The air in my office was thick with anticipation, a stark contrast to the sterile perfection of the glass walls and sleek mahogany desk before me. Outside, the city hummed with life, but inside these walls, the world was about to come crashing down for one man. A hesitant knock broke the silence. My assistant, Olivia, stepped in, her expression unreadable. "Ms. Carter, Andrew Whitmore is here for his meeting." I didn't miss the slight emphasis on the word meeting. We both knew this wasn't a job interview anymore, it was a reckoning. "Send him in," I said smoothly, arranging the files on my desk. Among them? A folder containing more than just his resume, evidence that could ruin him. Andrew stepped inside, looking nothing like the self-assured, arrogant man I had seen at family gatherings. His once pristine suit was slightly wrinkled, his usually slicked-back hair now disheveled. He looked smaller, like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, realizing too late that the ground beneath him was crumbling. He hesitated for a moment before lowering himself into the chair across from me. I let the silence stretch, watching as he fidgeted, adjusting his tie like it was suddenly suffocating him. "Mr. Whitmore," I began, my tone cool, controlled. "Before we discuss your potential role at Carter Tech, there's something I'd like to address." He swallowed hard. "Of course." I casually flipped open his file, my fingers gliding over the pages. Fraudulent transactions. Questionable investments. A pattern of embezzlement disguised under legal loopholes. I tapped a particular section of the report, watching as his eyes darted down to the incriminating evidence before him. 3 separate fraud investigations tied to your name, I mused, as if I were discussing nothing more than a minor clerical error. "Would you care to explain?" The blood drained from his face. I can assure you, there's been a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I echoed, tilting my head slightly. "That's interesting, because I have financial records, legal reports, and let's not forget, an ongoing federal inquiry." I shut the folder with a decisive thud, making him visibly flinch. The panic in his eyes was undeniable now. Then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed. I glanced down at the caller ID, and a slow smirk formed on my lips. "Vanessa." Without hesitation, I answered, putting the call on speaker. "Lauren, please." Her voice trembled through the line. "You can't do this to us. You know what this job means for Andrew, please, I'm begging you." I leaned back in my chair, my fingers drumming lightly against the polished wood. "I'm not doing anything, Vanessa. I'm simply reviewing a candidate's qualifications." You're punishing us for what happened at the wedding. I was wrong, okay? I was awful, but please don't ruin Andrew's career because of it. A dry chuckle escaped my lips. Ruin? Oh, Vanessa, my tone turned almost pitying. I didn't ruin anything. Your husband did that all on his own. The weight of my words sank in, thickening the silence. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, Vanessa broke. We'll lose everything. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I studied Andrew, the way his shoulders had slumped, the way his hands were now gripping the arms of the chair like they were the only thing keeping him from falling apart. For once, Vanessa wasn't boasting, wasn't belittling me. She was simply desperate. And somehow, that was the most satisfying part of all. I exhaled slowly, then spoke with the same measured calm I had held throughout the conversation. Vanessa, I said, deliberate, firm. You once told me at my own wedding that I wasn't worthy of marrying a successful man. That I was beneath him. That I was nothing. I let the words linger, letting her sit with the weight of her own cruelty. Turns out, you were right, I continued smoothly. I didn't just marry a successful man, I became one. And with that, I ended the call. I turned my gaze back to Andrew, who now looked like a man waiting for his executioner's final verdict. You know, I mused, tapping my fingers lightly against the desk, there is an option to make this all go away. His head snapped up so fast, I thought he might get whiplash. Anything. Please. I slid a single document across the desk toward him. His eyes flicked down, scanning the bold letters at the top. Resignation agreement. If you sign this, I said, resigning quietly from your firm and returning every cent you stole, I won't escalate this further. His breath came out shaky, his hands trembling as he reached for the pen. And just as he pressed ink to paper, the doors to my office burst open once again. Vanessa stormed in, her face streaked with tears, her voice shrill. You can't do this to us, she screamed. I exhaled through my nose, rubbing my temples as Olivia stepped in behind her, looking unimpressed. Should I call security, Miss Carter? I waved a hand dismissively. That won't be necessary. Then, turning to Vanessa, I met her bloodshot eyes with nothing but indifference. Remember when you said I didn't deserve to marry a successful man? I asked, voice calm, measured. Vanessa's breath hitched. Well, turns out you were right. I stood, smoothing out the sleeves of my blazer. I didn't just marry a successful man. I became one. And as Vanessa stared at me, her expression shattered beyond repair, I finally saw it. The moment she realized she had lost. The fallout was swift and merciless. The very next morning, the headlines splashed across every major news outlet. High-profile attorney caught in financial scandal, resigns amidst fraud investigation. The accompanying photo? Andrew, looking disheveled, stepping out of his law firm for the last time. By noon, his firm had released an official statement, cutting all ties with him and emphasizing their commitment to integrity. His clients? Gone. His reputation? Shattered. And Vanessa? She was about to learn what it meant to have everything ripped away in the blink of an eye. That afternoon, her credit cards were declined at a luxury boutique in downtown Manhattan. She tried again. And again. Nothing. Confused, she pulled out her phone, only to find an avalanche of overdraft notifications. The money was gone. Everything. Her hands trembled as she called Andrew, but it went straight to voicemail. Desperate, she checked the real estate app on her phone, and that's when she saw it. Her beloved penthouse? Listed for foreclosure. She barely made it home before the first wave of reality crashed over her. Two men in dark suits were already at the door, posting a foreclosure notice on the sleek glass entrance. Ma'am, one of them said, his voice detached, professional. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises. Vanessa felt the floor drop beneath her. This is a mistake, she stammered, her voice cracking. My husband is. But even as the words left her lips, she knew. Her husband was ruined. And so was she. She didn't even have time to process it before her phone buzzed violently in her hand. Call after call. Notifications flooded in. She opened her social media, and her stomach twisted. Her name was trending. And not in the way she wanted. The comments under her recent post, an ostentatious display of designer handbags and champagne brunches, were brutal. Looks like that fabulous lifestyle was just smoke and mirrors, huh? Guess karma finally RSVP'd to your little socialite act. She bullied her own sister, and now she's crying? Boo-hoo. Vanessa's hands clenched around her phone. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. But it was. Her carefully curated image, the one she had built over years of flaunting wealth and looking down on others, was crumbling right before her eyes. And no one was coming to save her. Her breath came out in short, shallow gasps as she scrolled through the flood of news articles, exposing not just Andrew's fraud, but her own involvement. Her name was listed as an account co-owner. Aiding and abetting fraud. Her entire world was imploding, and there was only one person she could think to call. Me. The phone rang twice before I answered, putting her on speaker. Lauren, she sobbed, her voice barely coherent. Please. I made a mistake, okay? I was horrible to you. I know that. But this? This is destroying us. I leaned back in my chair, staring out over the city skyline from my office. It was poetic, really. The same woman who once stood in a grand ballroom, mocking me in front of hundreds, was now on the other end of the line, begging me to save her. And for a moment, just a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered. I remembered the years of insults, the way she ridiculed me every chance she got. I remembered the way she laughed at my supposed dead-end job. The way she stood at my wedding and tried to humiliate me, thinking she was untouchable. And so, my voice was calm, controlled, when I finally spoke. Oh, Vanessa, I sighed, my fingers lightly tapping against my desk. You always thought you were better than me. You thought money defined worth. A strangled sob broke through the line. Please, Lauren. You're my sister. I let the words linger in the air before I responded, my tone laced with something colder than she had ever expected from me. You made it clear at my wedding, I said smoothly, that family means nothing to you. I could hear her sharp inhale, like the final realization was settling into her bones. She had lost everything. And I had never felt stronger. I could hear Vanessa breathing heavily on the other end of the line, her sharp gasps punctuated by quiet, desperate sobs. For the first time in her life, she had nothing left to hold on to, no wealth, no power, no carefully crafted illusion of superiority. Just fear. Just regret. But it was too late. I let the silence stretch between us, savoring the weight of it. Vanessa was waiting, hoping I would say something, anything, that hinted at forgiveness. That maybe, just maybe, I would swoop in and fix the mess she had created. But I wasn't the same girl she once mocked. I exhaled slowly, tapping my fingers against my desk in steady rhythm. You know, Vanessa, I said, my voice eerily calm, I used to think that no matter how badly you treated me, you were still my sister. That if you ever really needed me, I would be there. I could almost hear the hope flicker in her breath, like a dying ember trying to reignite. But then I realized something, I continued, leaning forward slightly. The only time you ever cared about me was when you needed something. Vanessa let out a broken sound, something between a sob and a plea. Lauren, please. I have nothing left. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, letting her words sink in. She had nothing. No home, no money, no cushy lifestyle to fall back on. She was standing on the same ground she had once laughed at me for standing on. And maybe, if she had been a different person, I would have helped. Maybe if she had shown even a shred of genuine remorse before her world collapsed, I would have considered reaching out. But she wasn't. And she hadn't. I opened my eyes, steeling myself as I delivered the final blow. Then I guess, I said softly, you finally understand how you always made me feel. A choked sob escaped her, but I didn't wait to hear more. I ended the call. The moment my finger pressed end, an eerie stillness settled in my office. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before setting my phone down, exhaling a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Then, as if the universe had impeccable timing, a pair of warm arms wrapped around my waist. I turned slightly, feeling Ethan's steady presence behind me. He didn't say a word at first, he didn't have to. He simply held me, pressing a soft kiss to the side of my temple. "Are you okay?" he murmured. I tilted my head back against his chest, taking a moment to really, truly breathe. "Yes," I said, and for the first time in years, I actually meant it. I had spent so much of my life letting Vanessa define my worth. I had let her words sting, let her judgment weigh on me like an anchor. But standing here, with the man I loved, in the office I had built with my own hands, I realized something. I had already won. Not because she lost everything, but because I never needed any of it to begin with. Ethan smiled against my skin, his voice laced with quiet amusement. "So, think she'll finally learn her lesson?" I laughed softly, shaking my head. "Probably not. But that's not my problem anymore." He grinned, turning me gently to face him. "Good," he said, brushing a stray strand of hair from my face. "Because you have a honeymoon to pack for." I smiled, feeling something warm and light settle in my chest. A new chapter. A fresh start. A life finally free from her shadow. I took his hand, intertwining my fingers with his as we walked toward the door. And just before stepping out, I glanced back at my desk one last time. The past was exactly where it belonged. Behind me. "Before you go, what would you have done in my place? Would you have helped Vanessa, or let her face the consequences of her own actions? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you've ever had to walk away from toxic people to protect your own peace, hit that like button, because sometimes, the best revenge is simply moving on." At its core, this story isn't just about revenge, it's about self-worth, resilience, and the power of walking away from toxic relationships. It's a reminder that success isn't about proving yourself to those who doubt you, it's about knowing your own value, regardless of who recognizes it. Vanessa spent years tearing others down to build herself up, but in the end, her downfall wasn't caused by me, it was caused by her own actions. Now, I want to hear from you. What would you have done in my place? Would you have given Vanessa another chance, or let her face the consequences of her choices? Comment 2 if you loved this story, and 7 if you didn't. And if you've ever had to stand up for yourself or walk away from someone toxic, hit that like button, because choosing yourself is never the wrong choice. Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories like this. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.